Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Global Summit I Am Possible, an event to inspire you to have the courage to be yourself. And together we can make a heart-centered revolution. My name is Mar Guerrero, and I'm the founder of Alma Kemi. And today I'm very excited to have Gemini Red. He is a renowned astrologer, a shamanic storyteller, and he's honored recently by the Professional Astrology Association for his contribution and his connection between the living sky and the symbols. So welcome, Gemini. How are you doing?
Thank you, Mar. So it's very nice to be here. How are you?
Good. So I would love to start with your own journey into astrology. Like, what brought you to astrology?
Well, I mean, I didn't know that my desire to be an astronaut when I was a kid was leading me to the stars. After I released that one, which I watched the movie The Right Stuff, and I was like, oh, I got to be like this crazy test pilot if I want to be an astronaut, so that's out. But then I wanted to be a star. I was a saxophone player. I was a professional musician for many years. And I still had no clue. When my touring band broke up, I was really in pursuit of what am I as talented with that my peers in my band are talented with music, because I play with these great musicians and I'm like a good musician. And so it was tricky out on the road, where the bigger we got, kind of the smaller my confidence got, because I just felt like I was not hanging with these guys. But I was really kind of inspired to sort out, well, what am I genius at? And the answer for me had always been like math and science stuff. So I ended up going back to school, and I got an engineering degree, which is what my mom always suggested for me. And I wanted to do aeronautical engineering because, you know, if I couldn't go to space, let's at least control the robots on Mars or whatever. But the gig in aeronautical engineering, it's very rare that you can get a job where you're not working for a company that builds bombs, and that just wasn't for me. And so I ended up getting a mechanical engineering degree, and I was playing a lot of music still. And I graduated. I actually had this really cool, weird experience. I guess it was my senior year at University of Washington. And I mean, I took a lot of time off school to pursue music. So I was 30 years old at the time. It was kind of a Saturn return zone. And I was looking at this street lamp waiting for the bus, and I saw drawn around the street lamp all the things we would draw on our engineering paper about gravity's pulling it down and all, you know. And I was like, wow, I just completely constricted my consciousness to this like mechanistic worldview. And if I continue on this engineering path, like I could get stuck there. And I didn't want that, because I've also always been an artist. And so that, I think, was the moment that I kind of gave up on an engineering career. So when I graduated, I just kind of found a job that would give me a lot of free time so I could keep playing music as I tried to find my way. And as it is for many of us, I kind of had a rock bottom moment sometime in my life. And that brought me to healing and to eventually to plant medicines, which really changed my world. And I found my way there through finally following those strange synchronicities that pop up in your life. You know, before they were just like little coincidences. And at some point I really understood that if I was at the coffee shop and I met somebody who reminded me of somebody, I should call that person, and they might have a message, and I should go where that message led me. And then when I did, I would see the thing that reminded me of, you know, and just kind of following the synchronicity flow almost as a living experiment for a while, brought me to this healing circle, which was very important for me and changed my life, and brought me into down to Peru, where I was for the so-called, you know, end of the world date, the recycle date for 13 Baktuns of the Maya long count calendar, which most calculate to December 21st, 2012. So I was at Machu Picchu, and a couple of weeks before I had spent some time in Peru, and I thought maybe I was apprenticing in that particular work. But just before then, I had met Daniel Jamario, who I understand was also on the summit. That was my first astrology teacher. I never really had a thing for astrology. I mean, I would read the Scorpio horoscope every now and then because that's my sun sign, and sometimes it spoke, and usually it didn't. And part of my healing path led me into the tarot, and there's some astrological associations with the cards, and so I was becoming interested there. But when on those synchronicities arranged for enough friends in the same week to say, "Hey, you should get a shamanic astrology reading," I booked a session with Daniel, and waiting for his session, I read his book a few times. And that was the first time I realized that I'm not just a Scorpio, that the moon was in the sign of Gemini when I was born, that Gemini was rising, that Venus was in Virgo. We could go on and on and on. Mercury's in Libra. And so that was really cool. And Daniel's system of shamanic astrology paradigm, it's a really beautiful, simple system that helped me understand much more about me. And when we spoke, I kind of read my chart to him in his style, and he corrected me on a bunch of things, and then he proceeded to tell me a bunch of things nobody should possibly know about me, right? Like, and I think anyone who's pursued astrology with an open heart and sat at the foot of a master has like really found quickly that there is something to this. I mean, for many of us, I mean, just even sitting with a computer printout, it's like, whoa, what is this weird thing? So anyway, by the time I got to Peru, I had a pretty deep experience with Jupiter in the jungle sky, which is really strange. I didn't know at the time that Jupiter was in Gemini and not my ascendant. Well, actually, I knew he was in Gemini. And because I remember looking in Peru and seeing he was in the constellation of the Bull. And I was really confused because I could see on this chart that it said Jupiter was in Gemini, but in the sky, I could see that he was with Taurus with these horns. And I was like, "What's up with this?" And he spoke to me in English. So it was the weirdest thing. I had to kind of sit later with, well, was that some psychotic break I just experienced, or am I actually speaking with the planet? And I chose the latter because it just seems safer. And it was this long conversation where I had this open dialogue with Jupiter, and he kind of explained all these different things about the difference between signs and constellations and precession and what the zodiac actually is. And that had been really a part of my love, because I had been pursuing the Maya calendar, the long count calendar. I'd been pursuing the work of the great John Major Jenkins, who spoke about the power of the 2012 time and what the Maya seemed to be looking towards in the sky. And yeah, that was a moment for me where suddenly I was kind of realigned, and I realized that what I was actually apprenticing was in the shamanic astrology work. And shortly after that, I went to Arizona and I took some classes with Daniel, which were great, and really spending some time out under the stars. And Daniel and I have a lot of really similar fascinations for stone circles and pyramids and ancient sites. And he had been to all these places I wanted to go, and some I had been to. And I've caught up for a good amount of them now. It's going to take my lifetime to get to them all. But, we really bonded over music as well. Daniel loves great music. And so it was wonderful, and it was great to tune into that system. And you've studied shamanic astrology. It's a very powerful, beautiful archetypal system. And I really had no intention of starting to practice. I was like trading readings for massages and acupuncture and that. But then those people were like, "How much do you charge? I want to send my friend to you." And I was like, "I don't know." But I started sitting with people, literally with Daniel's book at my side. And with no like pretense around I'm some master astrologer, like I'm new at this, but I found it's really helped me. And what I realized is I was really quickly helping people help themselves. And that's who I've always been, right? I'm the guy that for some reason the person in the grocery store line is telling me their life story, and then always it's like, I can't believe I just told you that, right? Never told anyone that. And so the tarot helped for a little bit. I was looking at cards for a while, some years before this, but astrology is much more me. And there's this kind of engineered piece to it. But it's such a dynamic and beautiful system. And just contemplating the why in the heavens could this thing possibly work? Like, why would it in any way shape my energetic in regards to where the moon was in the sky when I was born, or what phase it was? Or, you know, it just seems kind of ridiculous and out there. But I mean, looking back, I saw me wanting to be an astronaut, me wanting to be a star, me wanting to send robots to Mars. Like, it was all pointing me on this path that in hindsight is really clear. And one of the things that I'm maybe best known for in astrology is reconnecting astrologers to the living sky. And this is something that's very near and dear to Daniel's heart, that we want to get back to the ancient astrology, to what we can imagine the ancients were after, which were actually speaking with the sky, seeing how it moves, seeing how it swims, and then seeing how that correlates to experiences, to correspondences on Earth. Because astrologers, for the most part these days, are, and me included, we're looking down at pieces of paper, looking into these screens, small screen. But when we get out to the big screen of the living sky, and we reconnect, I like to say, when we renature our astrology, we will remember the roots of the rules and the proofs of the astrological equations we use. Some of that for me is just in my like deep-seated resistance to any teaching, because, you know, I was always told in school by people I thought were very intelligent that astrology was utter nonsense and archaic, you know, superstitious ridiculousness, and other things in my teaching, education / programming that I've really had to release and shed and kind of reclaim, you know, some purity of thought and seeking. And that's true, I think, for any mystic. So I'm resistant to, even when I really respect a teacher or an astrologer, it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to take this guy's word for it. like this woman's word for it. Like, that's fine. Where did you learn that? And where is it in nature? So I always just get out and sit under the sky. And it's like, it's so awe-inspiring, the sky. It's so endless. And to kind of help, you know, it's weird for me, but when I look up, I feel more connected to the earth. And I was like getting more grounded and just asking these questions like, well, what is the zodiac actually? Because these constellations and signs don't align. And Jupiter had given me this cool download about it, but I've spent so much time since then, like spinning globes and thinking of, you know, how does the earth relate to space, and what does that have to say about Gemini and Scorpio and all these things, you know? And my pursuit then brought me into many of the sister traditions of astrology, which in the mystery schools were called the quadrivium, the sacred sciences. So I'm a fan of saying, let's keep the sacred science sacred by keeping it scientific, and let's keep it scientific by keeping it sacred. So we live at a time where the sky study has been divided into like these, for the most part, rationalist astronomers, right, who are in these telescopes looking so far away back into ancient time and space and contemplating the creation of the cosmos and theorizing about that, which is cool. But for the most part, they are in strong opposition to the idea of correspondences, to the idea that somehow these things could in any way influence our energetic experience as earthlings, which for me is ridiculous, because the easiest way to see that astronomical cycles influence our experience is day and night. Nobody feels the same at 3 a.m. as they do as 3 p.m. You know, so if we just start there and say, okay, there's something to this, but you know, mechanistic minds need a mechanism for a belief. And anyway, as the astronomical pursuit has gotten, for the most part, very materialistic, very rationalistic, we're really releasing and forgetting so much of the tropical astronomy that's at the root of the craft, to the point where astronomers today tend to attack astrologers as idiots because, oh, your signs aren't even what you think they were because they're not aligned like they were 2,000 years ago. And there's this 13th sign, you hear this thing, and it's all ridiculous. It's really preposterous. And it's because, sadly, the astronomers are either choosing to ignore so that they can attack, or literally, and I think this is true, forgetting the feet on the ground earth astronomical experience that's at the very root of the tropical zodiac, which proves that, like so many shamanic systems around the world, tropical astrology is based upon a zodiac, based upon a system that is aligned to the energies of the cardinal directions. And in the sister traditions of astronomy, which is number in time and space, and their number in time, that's musical harmony, and number in space, that's geometry. These days, sacred geometry might appeal a little bit more to the mystical mind than this idea of Euclidean proofs in math class, because that's not what it was in the day. Or it was also that. And then number itself, because number itself is, in so many regards, it's not just some like intellectual, distraction or invention. There is something about the fabric of nature which speaks in this language of number. And so that's the quadrivium pursuit. Sadly, there's really no books. I mean, there's some books that are called that, but there's no books that exist from the mystery school days. But the cool thing is, like, if you want to learn astronomy, all you gotta do is go sit on a rock and look up and take some time and contemplate. If you want to learn geometry, you sweep a compass and draw some lines with the rule, and suddenly it starts teaching you directly. If you want to learn musical harmony, you pick up an instrument and you open your ears and you learn how to hear, And there's something about number where we can do this too. So one beautiful thing about the mystical sciences is, even when, as it is often the case for students today in a culture devoid of elders and those who can initiate us along the way, we have to seek teachers for that. But a beautiful thing is that the subject itself is the teacher. So I've pursued, since I started my quest in professional astrology, or I guess maybe I'll say like legitimate astrology, with Daniel and the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, I pursued many different paradigms. I'm really interested in saying, oh, how did they do it in Egypt 2,000 years ago? How were they doing it in India at the time? Like, what changed in the 1930s when this whole kind of archetypal dreaming psychology first started showing up, and when Pluto was discovered, and, and for me, it's kind of like, my work as a jazz musician, where it's well known, you just find a bunch of cats who if you dig how they play, like, learn to play some like them, and in that way you're going to find your own voice. And so I'm in a really weird space in my own astrological pursuits, where I know that the system where I began really works, and then I've found that this old thing like works in a really different, weird way, and somehow I'm going to find myself in the middle. And it's led me to this like cosmology, thanks to sweeping circles and studying circles and crescents and seeing how the music and the zodiac relates and these kinds of things. That's just, helping me, I think, remember something that is ever sung by the marriage of heaven and earth. Very long answer to a short question, but there you
It's
go.
perfect. It's perfect because you already touched the things that I wanted to ask you already. So it's perfect. There are so many things I would like to say, but let's go to that tropical, like the signs and the constellations, because for me, I feel that is so important for everyone who is into astrology to tap into. And I was talking to Daniel G. Mario about the turning of the ages and why now we are living in such a intense and powerful and profound times. So it's those directions in the tropical astrology. Can you go a little bit further in how that works?
Yeah, for sure. Let me show you some pictures. So I guess you have to set me up to screen share here, Mar. Maybe make me a co-host or whatever that would be. Yeah, it's a really confusing thing because most astrologers, whether they're practicing like so-called Eastern astrology, where the sidereal zodiac, which means of the stars, is employed, or they're Western astrologers practicing with the tropical zodiac, most astrologers, I think, believe that the constellations are the signs. And that's just not true, and actually never really was. So let me show you some images, because there's actually many different answers to what is the zodiac. Let's see. And there's some, at my offerings page at GeminiBrett.com, there's like longer movies where this could be explored.
Yeah.
Like there's a movie called The Turning of the Ages and the Sun on the Cross, which will show a lot of what I learned in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. Daniel's really one of the only astrologers, because he's connected to the sky. He's one of the only astrologers who noticed that this great thing was happening that seemed to be predicted by the Maya and their long count calendar. And then I've brought my direction to a place that's opposite Galactic Center, which is a place that many have looked. So there's a great book called called Galactic Alignment by John Major Jenkins that I just really encourage any modern mystic to get down with. Sadly, John passed away a couple of years back. But it's a really wonderful book that's kind of looking towards the Maya cosmogenesis in regards to what was this 2012 date. And he sees an astronomical happening there that's not written, you know, but I think he very precisely and accurately laid it out. And then he found traces of this in the Egyptian transmissions and those of the Vedic transmissions, Celtic. So it's a great book. And then I found a bunch of like biblical stuff that really supports this idea that we now are living in this turning of the ages. So one thing that 2020 had been kind of honored by many astrologers. I mean, I was asked to do interviews about 2020 in like 2017. Right? And it's like, what about 2017? What about 2018? Like, you know, but there are really powerful things happening in the year of 2020. And a lot of people look towards the kind of coming together of Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto. But this thing is kind of where it's at. And maybe we'll get to that. But what I want to utilize this slide for first is this. This is December 21st, 2020. And there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the sign of Aquarius, the very first degree of Aquarius, okay? But if you know your stars, this is the constellation the astronomers call Sagittarius. And this is Capricorn. And Aquarius is way down here, like mostly off screen. So why would we possibly say that this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is happening in Aquarius when Aquarius is way down here? Or I can see as well, this star is a very powerful star called Antares, the heart of the Scorpion. Traditionally, it's one of the 4 royal stars. But in our day and age, that's 10 degrees tropical Sagittarius. So this image of my charts would show Venus in Sagittarius. And you're like, wait a second, she's right with the Scorpion. That's the tail of the Scorpion. And the Archer is way over here. So what's going on? And it's really because there's different images of what the zodiac actually is. This is a really ancient reference probably to the zodiac from what's known to be the oldest scripture that we have record of, which is the Rig Veda, where we hear the 12-spoked wheel of order rolls around and around the sky and never ages. 720 suns in pairs rest on it, O Agni. Agni's the sun. So many have suggested that this 12-spoked wheel of order is the zodiac. You know, they're not coming out with that very exoterically, but perhaps this is what's being spoken of. I like to say astrology is the ancient 12-step program. And then I'm really interested in saying 720 suns, because of course 720 is twice the degrees in a circle. And Jyotish astrologers, who many will know as Vedic astrologers, Indian astrologers, have argued that, yes, this is a zodiacal statement, and that what these 720 suns in pairs are the 720 half degrees of the zodiacal circle. Because in that tradition, there's like a masculine half and a feminine half of every degree of the zodiac. So you get these 720 pairs. And I certainly didn't translate this, nor could I. But then I wonder, well, why say sons? Because, you know, where's the daughters? If, you know, I think that this possibly is actually speaking about two 12-spoked wheels, or two different zodiacs. And a thing that for me emphasizes that idea is this quote from later in the same scripture, which says, two birds, friends joined together, clutch the same tree. One of them eats the sweet fruit. The other looks on without eating. Right. So, I mean, what does that have to do with astrology? What does that have to do with wheels of order and 12 spokes? And, you know, who are these birds? So just importantly, and I'll get back to it, it says one bird's eating the sweet fruit and the other looks on without eating. I would say that one who needs to eat from this tree is tied to it, and the other one is kind of free to roam. So let me show you what that is, like astronomically. This is a lot to look at, so I'm actually going to strip this down and we'll build it back up. But that was an image of three popular zodiacal cosmologies in our day and age, I guess. This is the astronomer zodiac, all right? And so I'll call it the constellational zodiac. And what this yellow circle that you see here is, it's called the ecliptic plane. So that plane is formed by the Earth's orbital path about the sun, right? So as Earth orbits the sun in a year, it draws out this plane, and we call that the ecliptic. And the way that we experience that plane actually is not in us orbiting the sun, but rather we're on Earth, so we see the sun orbiting us and moving through our sky. Now, if you extend that plane to infinity, you encounter the constellations of the zodiac. So from Earth's point of view, the sun is always held by one of those 12 star groups. That being said, I mean, I've just shut my blinds because the sun is really bright setting where I am right now. There's no way I can tell you what stars that sun is aligned to. I'm going to get my white ass burned and, you know, maybe go blind trying to. There's something very mysterious about the sun I can barely see now, right? But after the sun sets, I can see the constellation where it will journey to next. Or because our solar system is relatively flat, each according to their own periodicity, each of the planets comes from the Greek planetos, which means wanderers. And the sun and the moon, therefore, are seen as wanderers because every year the sun wanders around this ecliptic circle through these constellations of the zodiac. The moon does it in 27 days. Saturn in 29 and a half years, Jupiter in 12, right? But we can look at the planets and they're basically describing the same path that the sun takes. Not exactly, because they all have their own gig. The ecliptic itself is the plane of the Earth-Sun relationship. So anyway, what astronomers believe the zodiac is today is these constellations. And some even paint in this 13th one who's way up here, who actually wouldn't even fit in the screen, is called Ophiuchus, but these are part of the Ophiuchian stars. For some reason, they've severed the 14th brightest star of our sky, the heart of the Scorpion, Antares, which is so close. And they say this part of the ecliptic actually belongs to a constellation up here, which is just weird. And that's maybe a tale for another time. People can find some videos from me on YouTube, which will help show why this whole 13th sign nonsense is just that. So many of you I know won't have heard about this idea that there's a 13th sign of the zodiac. Many of you will have. Don't believe the hype. Anyway, so very importantly, and this is one of the arguments that the rationalists stake in their attempt to prove the zodiac fake, is they say, well, how can you ever have 12 equal signs, right? Because what we do in astrology, we say, all right, the circle is 360 degrees. And there's 12 signs of 30 degrees each. Now, why 12? Maybe because there's 12 months a year. Why are there 12 months a year? Because there's 12 months a year, right? But actually there's 12.368 on average moons per year. And it's not like you start January 1st with a new moon every year. And why should you start New Year's on January 1st anyway? Like, what's this whole Gregorian trip about? And maybe there's more astronomical dates we should use for the year, like equinoxes and solstices, and I'll show you what those are. Because they're fundamental to the idea of the tropical zodiac. So it's kind of a confusing thing of why 12 in the first place. And the way that this is taught historically is that it's a remnant of the Babylonian solilunar calendar, which is now postceded by the Hebrew calendar, which is a calendar of 12 months, but it's not a yearly calendar. It's not a sun calendar. And let's not go too far down that road, or I'll get a little bit more technical than we need to get. These things can be really confusing. And I'm a huge fan, again, of astrologers like learning the astronomy, not only so we can defend ourselves against the attacks of the rationalists, but if we understand where these ideas are coming from, like why they are a thing, we're going to have a much more intimate connection to them, and we're going to be able to speak much more intimately of their mysteries. So one of the claims that the rationalists take is like, hey, why can you divide this thing into 12 equal slices? And in our sister sciences, I mean, we can hear it here. There's 12 half steps in a musical octave. Now you can also say that's just some like invention, like that's not a natural thing, but it is actually based upon resonant frequencies. And there's some strangeness to it. I wish I had a seed of life here, but people probably know this image of the flower of life. And that comes from just drawing circles. And you'll find that 6 circles can always be woven around one to form this image that many of us call the seed of life. It's shown all around the globe from many different cultures throughout time. And it will show you, as I like to say, that creation creates in 12s. But anyway, the constellations of the zodiac definitely do not divide this ecliptic circle into 12 equal slices. Like this constellation, the astronomers call Virgo, but I prefer to call the priestess to differentiate constellations from signs. They're very different things. The priestess describes like 46 degrees of ecliptic arc, whereas the mighty ram over here, only about 15 degrees. So they're making a very valid argument to say, hey, your signs aren't even the constellations. But the sad thing is, we never said they were. Or maybe actually in the old days, you'll hear things like born under the scorpion or born under the sign of the lion, these kinds of things. But most astrologers that I know, they will show like an image of the scorpion when they talk about Scorpio in regards to where the sun lives between October 23rd and November 21st or whatever, even though the sun is definitely nowhere near that constellation at that time. And it can be a very confusing thing. But so zodiac number 1, and probably the easiest to understand, is constellational zodiac. There's 12 constellations that embrace this ecliptic plane, which is the plane of the Earth orbital path about the sun, or from Earth's point of view, the sun's path about us, and for the most part, the planets, because our solar system's relatively flat. And they dance through these 12 constellations called the zodiac, right? And so this is what the astronomers, most astronomers I know, are limited to. They believe that the constellations are the zodiac. And that's what they teach. So another very popular zodiacal cosmology that is mostly employed in India by Vedic or Jyotish astrologers is called the sidereal zodiac. Now there are rich sidereal traditions, well, at least modern traditions in the West as well. Sidereal means of the stars. So just like the constellational zodiac, the sidereal zodiac is a star-based thing. But unlike the constellation of Zodiac, the sidereal Zodiac, which is shown here as the purple ring of spelled out signs on the outside, they do divide the circle into 12 equal slices of 30 degrees. So they're going to say, okay, Sagittarius is 30 degrees, Scorpio is 30 degrees, even though that includes, therefore, some of the Scorpion in some of the scales. Libra's 30 degrees, even though that 30 degrees consists mostly of priestess feet, you know, and you get a little bit scales here. So it's really important to know. And what I've found is many sidereal astrologers who, like many of the rationalists, will argue against tropical astrology to say, look, your signs don't align to the constellations, you fools. And they raise a valid point, but my response always is, hey, neither do yours. Because you can never have, to the rationalist argument, truth, that you can never have a zodiac of 12 equal signs that's aligned to constellations that vary significantly in size. Like, it's impossible. And interestingly, the sidereal zodiac is calibrated to this star. It's called Spica or Spica or Chitra in most of the Indian tongues. And it's the shaft of wheat that the priestess of the heavens holds. Or interestingly, and Daniel taught me this, there was another cosmology in the Americas where this was seen as like a squaw with an ear of corn. Or there's an incarnation of Kuan Yin, who's honored in some of the Indonesian mysteries, where this is that incarnation of Kuan Yin and she's holding a rice paddy. So how strange that these three different places around the world at three very different times are kind of seeing that constellation in the same way, and seeing the star as like this agricultural gift that this goddess of the heavens is bringing. You know, like, how does that work? Because to me, that would either say that, you know, one, we have a common heritage that's been lost, and I am very aligned to the idea that humanity is a species with amnesia, and that's one of the great problems that we've got right now, and it's erupting in all sorts of issues. And maybe we can get to that. That's kind of a different story, but it's the story. So either we came from the same place and we preserve this knowledge in different languages and in different ways, or there were the same teachers who came from who knows where and taught us all of these things. I guess that's an interesting.
Yes, it's like the sun is fighting with you.
Yeah, he's just about to set. Right, or so we came from the same place, we came from different places, but we had the same teacher, or that's just what that star is. And that kind of mythic imagery supports the energy that that star offers to us. I don't know. And the Yoidish astrologers, they have a really beautiful reason. I'm not going to try to share it here. That's not my studies so much. And I'm just not qualified to do so. But they have a really beautiful reason that I've heard. It's very poetic and mystical, of why you would start 0 degrees Aries here, in the place of space that is opposite that star. And that's how these sidereal zodiacs, most of them, there's actually many different kind of correlations of the sidereal, of the star zodiacs, but the ones that are most popular are calibrated to the star. The really interesting thing is, okay, you're aligning 0 degrees sidereal Libra to the alpha star, to the brightest star in the Virgo constellation. So clearly that is not a constellational thing either. I mean, contrary to the belief of most sidereal astrologers, and even most tropical astrologers, like on the street, which is the weirdest thing, because the tropical signs have like nothing to do with the constellations, maybe historically, but like, so this is tropical Libra. So the tropical zodiac here is shown with the glyphs in blue. And, you know, my work, what I've done is show that these different glyphs, they're all transmissions of sacred astronomy. They're all transmissions of tropical astronomy. So like a good example would be the Sagittarius glyph. So we say, oh, it's the archer's arrow, and that's the archer. And it points to galactic center, by the way. But I'll tell you what that is, which is the spin axis of Earth and the plane, which is tilted in respect to her orbital path. And it's like, there's just couldn't be anything more clear. But I see that clearly because I've spent a lot of time spinning globes, you know. In each of these, and the truth is we don't have any idea where these glyphs that we use to denote the signs came from or when they came in. I can't find any astrologer who will let me know when they first showed up. It's weird. But they very clearly, like Gemini, the sun gets higher in the sky for 6 months and then 6 months gets lower from summer solstice, right? Anyway, so that's another topic, one of my favorite things to share. So the tropical zodiac, like the sidereal zodiac, divides the ecliptic circle into 12 equal slices of 30 degrees, but it has a different starting point. Again, the sidereal zodiac is calibrated to that star Spica. So that's 0 degrees sidereal Libra. And then you just go 30 degrees from there, start Scorpio and that. But Spica in our day and age is 24 degrees tropical Libra. And here you can see tropical Libra, that's its glyph, which is the setting sun, is like all priestess. And tropical Scorpio is like priestess foot and scales and kind of getting close to the Scorpion, but not really. The Scorpion's held by Sagittarius. So like, what's going on here, right? I mean, clearly it has nothing to do with the stars. And this is why astronomers will just say, well, it's wrong. But sadly, they're choosing to forget or ignore the very elegant, directional, you can see the directions here, truth of the tropical zodiac. And, you know, with my path, which has taken me, you know, very honored to have spent just a little bit of time sitting at the feet of the elders of like Lakota tradition, of Shipibo tradition in Peru, like different places that I've gone where there's transmissions around the power of these cardinal directions, that we create these medicine wheels, that we honor the directions. And truthfully, it works different in Peru than it does in in North America, because North and South hemisphere, you know? Which is a thing that also tropical astrologers have to deal with, because we'll often say, no, the tropical zodiac, it's not constellational. I mean, again, here's Sagittarius, and it's all Scorpion, while the Archer's over here. In our day and age, we're about one sign off. Like our signs are misaligned, if you will, from the constellations they are traditionally associated with by about one. And this changes. So, I mean, I can show that this is like 2020, that my partner, Scorpiana, and I made this. And as we move through time, this is going to change. So like around 2440, we'll be at a time where now it's completely like these two 12-spoke gears, 12-tooth gears or 12-spoked wheels are now one gear, one tooth click away. So that at that time, all of tropical Sagittarius will equal all of sidereal Scorpio. And this might be an image for when the dawning of the age of Aquarius is. So a lot of argument about what that is. What Daniel would have spoken with you about is looking to a different place of the heavens. And maybe we'll do that some together. I'm not sure. It's up to you where you want to go. But I'll continue just showing what the tropical zodiac actually is, because it's the hardest one to explain in some senses. And then it's like, oh, clearly. So one thing that tropical astrologers often use as a defense or as a true justification to what the tropical signs are when faced with the challenges of those who would say, well, it's not aligned to the stars, so it's wrong. So it's seasonal. So you also hear things like the sun rules Leo because it's the hottest time of year. Well, tell that to somebody who lives in Brazil. And still, if somebody's born in August in Brazil, you know, we'll say they're a Leo or the sun's in Leo. I don't like to say a Leo. I don't like that sun sign astrology thing too much personally. But so we can't say that it's only about like the changing of temperature and that kind of thing. If we want to use the same system for natives in both northern and southern hemisphere, there's something more to it. And what I found is that it's about the directions, and north is north everywhere on Earth. So anyway, in 2440, like all of tropical Sagittarius will equal all of sidereal Scorpio. And at that same time, therefore, all of tropical Pisces will equal sidereal Aquarius. And again, that could be an image of the dawning of the age of Aquarius. So what is this tropical zodiac thing? And it's directional. And let me strip this down because it's also kind of a lot to see. So I'll build up here and then I'll take a pause and we can see where you want to go with this. Okay, Mar?
Perfect.
I'm going to strip this way down just to the Earth herself and to what's called her primary motion. Okay, which is the spinning of Earth on her axis. And again, on the level where astrology is the truth of correspondences in regard to astronomical cycles influence our energetic experience as earthlings, right? That's one thesis of what astrology is. Again, all I have to say is day and night. People will go with the moons pulling on Earth's waters and the tides, and you're made of 70% water too, so of course she's pulling on you. And yeah, but the way to begin that argument is day and night. How do you feel at 4 a.m.? How do you feel at 4 p.m.? And whether you're, normal or you're working the graveyard shift, it doesn't matter. Like, at one time you're likely awake and the other time you're likely asleep, and the flowers open to receive the light and close at night to dream and rest, and we should too, and that's all because of what? An astronomical cycle, which is the daily spinning of Earth, right? So this is called the primary motion, though it's become very secondary to modern astrology. Plato called this the motion of the same. And these poles, they define the cardinal directions. And so very importantly, when we're speaking about the power of the directions, it's not magnet directions. That's like a mistake that many, modern mystics make. Because the magnetic poles, north and south poles, they migrate. They are a result, we believe, in modern physics of Earth's magnetic field and the relationship of whatever's at Earth's core and with the sun, which we can be very thankful for because it protects us from all sorts of solar radiation and whatnot. But the magnetic poles are known to migrate around. We have to adjust the, compasses when they do. When you move around the Earth, you need a different calibration for how far off your compass magnetic north is from true north. True north is defined by that, by what I like to call Gaia's spine or the world tree. This axis of our rotation, like if the Earth is a wheel, this is the axle, right? And it emanates from the heart of Earth where we are all one. And it moves through our terrestrial poles, like Santa's zone, and then it points to these places in space called the North and South Celestial Pole. And one very important thing about them is you can learn to see them in the sky. For one thing, in our day and age, we're blessed to have a pole star in the Northern Hemisphere, North Star. But Polaris won't hold that title for too long because it's not always our pole star because of an interesting motion of Earth. I don't know. We'll go there today, but maybe. But importantly, just this primary motion, like sands through the hourglass, these are the days of our life. Like this thing spins in 24 hours and it brings you such hits as sunrise and sunset, right? So the sun is setting on me right now, and for Mar in Thailand,
Rising.
just rose, right? I'm in California. So importantly, we would both say that sun is in the very last degree of Scorpio today as we're recording in November of 2020. And we actually measure planetary position in the signs from the center of the Earth where we're all connected. But from the surface of the Earth, Thailand and California are having a very different experience. That shows up in astrology charts by where the planets are in the houses. The sun just moved into the 6th house, which means it's set for me, and probably in the 12th or 11th for you now. But either way, it's in Scorpio, and that's a directional thing, which I'll show you. So importantly, the primary motion. And so where these axes, the axial points in the sky, is a place that doesn't move. Right? When you look at a wheel spinning, you see that blur of its spokes, but the center looks still. And our experience of the Earth's daily rotation, standing on Earth, is that of the sky's daily rotation. It's relativity. Just as our experience of Earth orbiting the sun is sun orbiting us in a year, right? So when you look to the sky in the northern hemisphere, you can look north and you will see that there is a point currently marked by Polaris about which all of the stars spin. And in the southern hemisphere, there's no star there in our day and age, but there's another point about which all of the stars spin. And that's simply because we are spinning on this axis. It's not like there's actually a tree or a bar here or whatever, right? But we're spinning on this axis, and where it points in the sky is a still point, right? And really, 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 really importantly, what I'm sharing is it defines the true directions. All right, so I like to call this spine of Gaia, world tree, the sword of our stone, and this plane of our spin, which is just Earth's equator, is called the Celestial Equator. So we project that out into space and we see what stars it's aligned to. I like to call that Celestial Equator the circle of matter. Because though Earth's daily spin brings you such hits as sunrise and sunset, it's completely the product of an earthly motion. And for me, Earth is the world of matter, the garden where we incarnate. And tropical astrology is all about the interface of this plane, the plane of our daily motion, with this plane, which is the plane of our yearly motion, or secondary motion as it's called. Our orbital path around the sun is on that ecliptic, which I usually mark with yellow to be consistent. I like to call it the circle of spirit, this ecliptic plane, because it's where the sun lives. And again, our experience of the Earth's orbit is the sun orbiting us. And every year the sun is on this cross, which sounds familiar. So this is the astronomy of the tropical zodiac. It's all about the interface of these two planes, the plane of Earth's daily rotation and the plane of Earth's annual orbit. Those planes intersect at the equinox points, which in the tropical zodiac, that's where we begin the zodiac. We say 0 degrees Aries is the place where the ecliptic, the year plane, crosses the equator, the day plane, from the south to the north. You often hear astrologers say, well, we begin the astrological year when the sun reaches 0 Aries, because that's the resurrection. That's when light overcomes night. We've moved from this time of winter or fall and winter, and now we're coming into the spring. But again, that's a hemispheric transmission, right? I'll show you another reason why we would do that. So the interface, the crossing of these two planes, which diverge by about 23.5 degrees, because that in our day and age is Earth's tilt angle, the tilt angle of Earth's spin to the plane of her year, right? So the crossing points are these equinox points in the tropical zodiac: 0 Aries, 0 Libra. And the places of greatest divergence, or what's called declination, are the solstice points. So let me show you how this is a directional thing. I will say, you know, again, how can we get from these very real, like elegant astronomical points, like just no doubt real astronomical points? How do we get from the 4 to the 12? That's kind of a long study, actually. And most of my students, we begin with the compass and the rule. And then we might bring in some of the music as we're exploring the astronomy too. But there's very beautiful and mystical reasons why I will say creation creates in 12. But one thing I don't have a hard time proving to the astronomers who will come attack me, you know, and I love it because I can speak astronomy. And I'll break out like a lamp and like an orange and put a stick in it, you know, and like, and I've done this, right? Like I've actually converted a few, like, you know, NASA scientists actually speaking at after parties and stuff. And then they get really interested. It was like, oh, well, oh, you're right. That's a thing. And then I'll say, well, let me look at your chart. Okay. And I'll say, oh, I bet you do this for NASA. Like I did this in Mexico City. I met a cat and he was open-minded enough. There was another guy who was just talking trash the whole time, but this guy was open-minded. I showed him what the tropical zodiac, the Earth Sun thing was. I showed him how it has nothing to do with the stars. either than our own. It's literally about Earth-Sun relationship. It's Earth spin and it's Earth orbit, which of course is a solar thing, right? And I showed that to him. He's like, oh, so that's a thing. And then I looked at his chart and I was like, I bet you are doing like oceanic sciences from like remote viewing from satellites. And it's totally what he does, right? How did I see that? He's Capricorn rising, so it's like Earth focus, right? He was born during that Uranus-Neptune conjunction in the early 90s, right? In Capricorn. So we see Uranus, technology, Neptune, the seas. And where it was in his chart, I was just like, dude, you're like looking at the seas for like climate change and Earth awareness using technology. And that's exactly what he does. He builds and designs satellites to monitor the level of the ocean, whether it's sinking or rising and all that, right? And then he was nuts for it. And we just were up all night. And he became a really good astrologer, a very bright guy, right? So he became an astrologer like really quickly. I haven't checked in with him for a while, but I'm wondering how it is for him at JPL these days. All right, anyway, so one way that we can look at the journey of the tropical signs is as a solar serpent. And this is the sun throughout the course of the year, snaking above and below the Earth's equator, right? So right now, as you and I are recording, we're in the very end of Scorpio season. And Scorpio is a southern sign. And so for the northern hemisphere, this is like longer nights than days. The opposite is true, of course, for the southern hemisphere. We have to face this truth of seasonal opposition. So, you know, there's a thing called declination. That's getting kind of tech here. But declination is simply the angular measurement north or south of Earth's equator. So you got a celestial object up there, like the North Star, for example, would be at a declination of 90 degrees north. So right above the North Pole. It's 90 degrees from the equator, you see. And the zodiac moves from 0 declination, which is what's going down at like equinox points. And then it goes up to 23.5 degrees because that's the Earth's tilt angle. And so one way we can see like these are tropical signs, tropical Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, they're all northern signs where you're increasing north. And then you get to this bending point, the serpent's back, before we start coming down. But really importantly to, you know, touch in with the general theme of this summit and this idea of directions, well, that is the north point. And it's a little hard to see in this image, so I'm going to turn this and orient it to the way that we're used to seeing globes, okay? Which is that you show the globe with that tilt, because we like to orient it to the orbital path. Like that's what's going on when you look at a globe. And there you can see that the Earth's northern pole is leaning towards this 0 Cancer degree. So I call that the north point. Now, I mean, it's not like north, but I'm in Richmond, California, the Bay Area. I could go outside on a clear night and find the North Star and walk towards that star until I'm in Seattle. I mean, I'd be pretty tired and I'd have to figure out ways to continue north when the sun rises and that star goes away and all that, right? But just because I'm not like literally flying through the sky towards the exact place in the heavens that that pole points doesn't mean that there isn't a projection of north onto my local horizon. The same truth, right, shows me that I can project Earth north onto this ecliptic plane, onto this zodiacal plane. And the Earth's northern axis always, forever and ever and ever and ever, though it won't align to the same constellation forever, that changes throughout the time of the great year, the Platonic year of about 26,000 years. And I'm sure Daniel spoke about that when you connect. It will always and forever lean towards 0 degrees tropical Cancer, which is June solstice. So summer solstice for the northern hemisphere, winter solstice for the southern hemisphere. And here's a beautiful truth. When the sun ingresses or moves into tropical Cancer, it shines somewhere on Earth directly overhead the Tropic of Cancer. right? The Earth's Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn are named for the same thing that the tropical zodiac and tropical signs are named for. Tropicos means turn around. And you can see this in that Cancer glyph. One way that we experience this solar serpent is that the sun sets in a different place every year. And you know, a fun thing, Mar, is that I understand that this will air in January of 2021.
Yeah, at the end of January.
Okay, so it'll be a little bit late, but where Scorpio comes Sagittarius sets is the same place where the first degree of Aquarius sets. Because what happens is the sun will have its most northern set in the sign of zero Cancer, June solstice, on the horizon. And we've kept calendars like this forever. And I see it in modern installations. There's a great one at the Vatican that shows the tropical astrology signs, which I find hilarious when I'm attacked by like religious people about how this is the devil's work. Or I'm like, let me show you my favorite astrology calendar on the Pope's front yard, you know? Anyway, yeah, you can see it in that Cancer glyph. The sun will move from December solstice. Now, whether you're in the southern hemisphere or the northern hemisphere, at December solstice, the sun sets furthest south on your horizon, furthest south of west. That's more extreme if you're far from the equator and less extreme if you're close. But it will always set at its southern extreme at December solstice. And then solstice means the stopping of the sun. So the sun stops, turns around, and then it moves north for 6 months. And you know, that's that Cancer glyph, running 6 months south and 6 months north. The moon does that every month. So this is the world tree, which defines the cardinal directions. And north and south, from there we can extrapolate east and west. And that's a strange thing, right? Because like if I go look west right now, the sun is setting. If you go look west right now, you're going to look at your shadow because the sun has recently risen behind you in the east, right? So east and west in that sense are relative to your surface location on Earth, right? Thailand's either behind California as the Earth spins or well ahead of us. I mean, it's both, right? But again, we measure the placement of planets in the signs from the center of Earth. When I first realized that, I was kind of uncomfortable with it. It's like, well, that's not where I live. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. But the truth is that center of Earth, it's the one place where we are all connected, where all earthlings are one. And it's a beautiful as above, so below transmission, truthfully, that like, okay, when that Jupiter and Saturn conjoin, it's basically going to create an energetic that is experienced in the heart of our planet, right? She's like a resonant, you know, speaker of that celestial symphony's chord, and then she'll broadcast it to all of us simultaneously. So just because you don't see it doesn't mean you don't be it, you know what I mean? And we'll all have that experience at the same time. That's planets in the signs, which we measure from the below, the center, the whole, where we are all one. And from that place, because there is a north and there is a south, there is also a global east and a global west. And that is the key of the tropical zodiac. We call them cardinal signs because they align not only to this world tree, which, by the way, I will suggest is that tree the two birds are clutching. Remember, I shared that passage from the Rig Veda, and it says one of them eats of the sweet fruit. I will suggest that's the tropical zodiac because it is literally defined by Gaia's spine. The northern axis always leans towards 0 degrees tropical Cancer. We do have a North Star on the top of the tree in our day and age. And the southern axis always leans towards tropical Capricorn. And the truth is those degrees are just above the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. So the sun's Zenith passage, and I know you had Mark Elmy on, and maybe he spoke about Zenith passage, which you can experience in tropical places like in the Mayan realms. But when the sun is at 0 Cancer, again, it's above the Tropic of Cancer. So that's like this north point. And so I'll draw it up there. And these cardinal signs, which are Cancer and Capricorn, and we'll fill in the others, Aries and Libra, they are literally aligned to the cardinal directions, which themselves are defined by Gaia's spine, the axis of our spin. So let me show you one more time in this kind of declination dance. Here we are where we were, the sun ingressing Cancer, the furthest north place, and then it starts coming down, it starts bending. And so the tropical signs of Cancer and Leo and Virgo are northern signs that are coming further south until now the declination is 0 when we ingress Libra, which is due west from the center of the earth. And that's why I argue the Libra glyph looks like the setting sun, because of course that's the most beautiful image of the West. Kind of tells me I should turn a lamp on. But before I go there,
you're getting, you see, but we are experiencing, right? Like the astronomy.
And it's real, right? And
yeah, we could see the whole process.
Tell me what time of day it is and what time of year it is. And if I know something about that local position, I can have an understanding of its energy, you know. But yeah. And plus we're going into the darkness here anywhere for my northern hemisphere experience, because this is the autumnal equinox for the northern hemisphere, 0 degrees tropical Libra. And then we go into these southern signs. The sun falls from the northern hemisphere perspective until it falls to its furthest southern place. The south point is the Tropic of Capricorn. And then we have these southern signs, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, that are south but coming back north until that sun is at the northern cross. So the sun on the cross, you know, where have we heard that before? And if you know your mysteries, you know that Jesus was crucified, Jesus who called himself the Son and was crucified for having done so, that he was crucified at Passover. And that these holidays currently celebrated by Christians of Easter and by Jews of Passover are aligned to this Aries equinox. Now, if you know the Passover story, right, it's a very tricky time where we're beginning Exodus, and, you know, of these many kind of ill fates that Yahweh cast upon the people of Egypt for making his people slaves. The last was probably the harshest, which was that the first child of each home would be taken by the angels in the night. Except for those who painted their door with the blood of the ram, right? And those homes were passed over by the angel of death. So that's like the Passover story of how it's transmitted. Well, let me show you what it is astronomically. This door is the equinox shift. And I should say, because the Hebrew calendar is a solely lunar calendar, it doesn't align on equinox day. It's aligned to a moon around equinox time, as Easter is too, a Sunday around full moon around equinox, right? So you're bringing in the days of the week, Sunday, the day of the sun, no kidding, because, right, this is solar worship in my book. I'm sorry if that offends people. You're bringing in the lunation, the dance of spirit and soul of sun and moon. So it's got to be a full moon. And then you're bringing in the sun-earth connection, which is the tropical zodiac. So the Aries equinox is the time when the sun is on the cross of these two planes, passing over the equator from the south to the north. And I'll say a little bit more about the north in a second, because this all feels very northern hemispheric. Well, you know, these traditions were northern hemisphere traditions, as was tropical astrology in its foundations in Egypt, Greece, Rome, you know, in the sidereal astrology coming out of Arabia, right, Babylonia, India. This is all northern hemisphere transmission, but still it applies to the southern hemisphere, and we can speak about why that is. So why ram's blood? Well, this is the time of Aries, and why? And this is very contradictory to the common transmission of astrological history, which is that, okay, the Babylonians, they got down to this kind of 12-month calendar, and they were tracking maybe the moon through these 12 places, or the sun through these 12 places to define the month. And that one of them was just this ram constellation. Well, if you know your constellations, you will find that not many of them like look like these glyphs that we use, or it doesn't really look like a ram at all. Maybe a ram's horn, or like especially like the shofar, like the ram's horn that's blown to announce the beginning of the month or whatever. But what I found, and I realized this in pilgrimage at a place that is very sacred to the lineage that I first connected to astrology through, which of course is shamanic astrology. Haleakala, the House of the Sun in Maui, where I just was for some time, has been kind of central to the receiving of this lineage. And I was there one night and freezing and just watching the east, waiting for the sun to rise. And what I noticed was this, that stars that rose south of east head to the south, and stars that rose north of east head to the north. And that, like the horns of a ram, they then hook back around to set in the west. And I believe this is why Amun-Ra, and this is why Aries is assigned, and the ram's horns are assigned to the sign of the east, which we also hear in Easter. Now we know Easter reaches back into older pagan traditions, right? Oester, but Oeste was the goddess of the dawn and the goddess of the east. And you just could not be more literal to say, okay, why we're celebrating Easter, right, is because at this time, when the sun is on the cross, passing over the Earth's equator, the primary plane, which is aligned to the cardinal directions, this is that one time every year when the sun is due east of the center of Earth. And east, and all you have to do is watch a sunrise to know this is true, east is the place of new beginnings. So this is why it makes sense for astrologers in our day and age, and many do, mundane astrologers will look to the sun's tropical Aries ingress to kind of describe perhaps the year ahead. And there's a lot of rules. It depends on what sign's rising and all sorts of things, or why we often call this the so-called natural zodiac, where you aligned 0 Aries, tropical Aries, to the place where we usually put the ascendant, or what's rising for an individual in their birth chart, because that point, 0 Aries, is due east from the center of Earth, where we are all connected. And that is the very real, elegant astronomy of the tropical zodiac, which over the course of this great turning of the ages in this great year of 26,000 years will realign and turn like a wheel within this wheel of sidereal signs or constellations. So let me put this away, and thank you for your awareness and patience. I'm going to turn on a light real quick.
Yes, 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 yes. So we can see you.
All right, that'll be a little bit better. But when we're talking mysteries, it's good to go into the dark, you know?
Yes.
So hopefully for people, I mean, people probably didn't know they were signing up for science class. But hopefully that helps people understand and maybe resist some of these things that they hear, like tropical astrology is no longer real. It was good 2,000 years ago, but the things have shifted and it's not aligned to the stars anymore. It never was. And even the time that like NASA is saying, and they do, when it used to be aligned, they're totally wrong. Because it wasn't at like 0 BC AD. It was like 285 AD, very close to the Council of Nicaea, interestingly, when that whole 0 AD BC thing was defined. It was around that time in 285 AD when the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac were precisely aligned. And because of this so-called tertiary motion or third motion of Earth, which is taught these days as a wobbling of the Earth's axis like this, while north on your street will always be north unless a comet comes to hit us again. That axis is going to point to different places in space. And as north and south describe different circles through the sky, that west and east, the global ascendant, move through the constellations over this great year of about 26,000 years. And that's tied to the dawning of the age of Aquarius mysteries. But in Daniel's work, what he's shown is like, yeah, and why do we have to focus on that star Spica to start like a heavenly zodiac? There's maybe another place of the heavens that visibly makes more sense. I mean, Daniel was born with Spica rising, so but there's some place when we get out, especially when we get away from the bright city lights, where it's like, what is that? And that seems to be what these Maya calendrics and these prophecies and what I've shown as some biblical prophecies are telling us, that our day and age is this time of great transformation, like literally the second coming. I don't know what that means, but in my cosmology, Christ literally is the sun in our sky. I think he was clear enough in saying that the 12 disciples would be the 12 constellations. Like a good example of that is Didymus Thomas means twins. So that's the guy I call Gemini. And there's a lot of mysteries that I follow from Egyptian transmission, Maya transmission, Celtic transmission, biblical transmission that are really pointing to the astronomy of our day and age and saying this is such a significant time to get realigned.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think it's absolutely perfect to also end with that this is a perfect time to get realigned, and that is going to look different for each person, and it's all about remembering who we truly are, and this is the main intention for the summit as well. And it's so fascinating that it's coming a lot from people also in trying to merge these rational side of us with also the intuition, that there is no need to choose anymore between both. So it's more about our learning how to work with both sides of ourselves. And it keeps coming from many of the speakers that is like there is a background in rational, very strong thought, and then it's not opposite. So then it's perfect to share all these scientific part that is sacred as well, that is not.
Yeah, and this is the astronomy that we could very well lose if astrologers don't choose to learn
Yes.
the root to the directional world tree focus of our zodiac, because the astronomers are really trying to unlearn it so they can simply attack us because that's hip, you know? And right, I mean, I think as we have gone so materialistic and so rational, right, we're kind of geared towards fighting that and destroying that so we can go fully intuition and to reclaim these facilities that should be natural to the human experience and should be taught by the elders, which so many of us are just completely severed from. You know, I come from a culture where elder equals older, you know, not from a culture where the grandparents raised the children and passed down the information, you know, and all of these things I think are really important for us to reconnect to the old language. And a beautiful thing too is like, if you don't have elder whose feet you can sit at, first what you do, like call on your grandparents, you know, call on your ancestors, go talk to the old lady down the road, but also talk to the sky. Talk to the earth, sit on the stones, lay down, witness the heavens. And I'll tell you this, the password to receiving the information, to opening that book, is awe. Because when you get outside and you look up, especially if you're under dark skies, you realize in a second you could never know at all that it is this mysterious thing that we can only glimpse into. And I found in my own personal connection and leading people to the sky, that if you allow yourself to just kind of crack up, like there's, you know, and it's hilarious trying to think that we can master this thing, that's when the book just kind of opens up and starts showing you like the little keys and the little pieces. And yeah, this is a time for us to remember who we are. And, you know, a great teaching in the geometry tradition is the geometer's only tools are the compass and the rule. Like you can either draw curves, right? So if I wanted to go to Seattle, I could follow that North Star, and like the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But if I'm smart and I've got some time, I should take the coast and head over to Mount Shasta on the way and go see some of those giant redwood trees. And, you know, who knows, bring a sleeping bag, who knows who all meet. Like, that's the curvy way. And we really want to be in all things, both curvy and straight, right? Both artistic and nocturnal and dreamy, and linear and rational and that, right? I mean, that's also sacred. And part of what we're here to do, like what geometry means, is measuring the earth. And as we witness these cycles, you know, higher understanding opens. But so often I find astrology is a way out for people. Yeah, when we look at these greater cycles, when we look into the future and look into the past, especially, we can come back into the present with more understanding. And so if astrology is being used as a way into this moment, and it's a way into the soul, not just as a way out, like some excuse I make about why I'm not a nice guy because some alignment of the planets when I first came in, right? Then it's a beautiful truth where really, what are we doing? We're connecting to nature. We're connecting to natural cycles. Just as the leaves fall from the trees every year, Jupiter dances through the sky and conjoins Saturn every 20. And there's something to be said about that, you know? So for folks who want to pursue that kind of turning of the ages thing further, when is the dawning of the age of Aquarius? And maybe there's another place we should look, and some of that biblical stuff I was talking about. Head over to GeminiBrett.com, and you'll find an offerings page. And there's a bunch of videos there. One of them is called The Sun on the Cross and the Turning of the Ages. And another one's called 2020 Revelations, which had me focus really not only on this great thing that's happening. From my book, it's like 1975 to 2025. We're in this amazing window that has long been prophesized, and it's astronomically shown, no doubt. But within that time frame, there were these eclipse points in 1982. 2001 was the strongest. That was the strongest year of our experience. Although 2020 is trying to compete, that's for sure. You know, and there's something that is requiring that we come back in, and that we tend to this shift first within, and that lets the tree without grow. Yeah, so that's what we're here for. In conclusion, the tropical zodiac, like so many systems from around the world, is about the energies of the cardinal directions. And it's not just a seasonal thing. Oh, so there's one thing I'll share there, and just kind of people can pursue my work to find out why. The Earth is moving north through space. So there is a side of the Earth that is the bow, and a side that is the stern, or there's a side that is the younger, and a side that is the elder. And so a lot of the transmissions or the delineations that astrology is using today in regards to this directional zodiac is also founded in that sacred motion. And I don't think that the ancients necessarily were like completely aware of that, possibly because I do feel that some time ago there was a great cataclysm and we were severed from our understanding and our knowledge, and the things that happened since are very tricky. But and I'll say this, actually, if we can begin to unfold and decode like why astrology is, and there's so much in me that still wants to deny that it's a thing, but it proves itself to me every day. If we can understand like there is a mechanism, and it's at the heart of Earth. And by the way, I think it looks like a hexagonal crystal, and there's good science to suggest it's there. And I think every planet has its own, and every planet has its own tropical zodiac. But I think if we can get into what that thing is, we can learn how the ancient wisdom keepers, the pyramid builders, were tapping into that same force to utilize and harness a type of energy which doesn't rely on burning our Mother Earth, but rather is literally in harmony with her. And that there's ways to connect to the harmony of the heavenly spheres, which resonate in the crystal heart of Earth, that we can find resonance with and utilize to offer expansion, energy for the whole world. And that's going to set us free from so many of these paradigms that have helped us kind of grow that rational mind out of control, right? We don't want to leave that. We want to come back into the heart, and it's the heart that's in resonance with the heart of our planet.
Yes.
And I feel it in you, Mar. So thanks so much for
Thank
inviting.
you so much. Yeah, thank you for so much for everything, because I haven't heard. It's such a unique perspective that you're bringing for, and I'm looking forward to people also in Spanish to read, and it's even like an extra effort, right? Because it's quite complex, and then it's about reading, but we need to do that. Like, the more we learn other languages and we see realities from different perspectives, then we can go into the core and bring our own vision of things and our own gift, that we don't need to fight with each other. We just co-create in a much more harmonious way. So that's the intention of the summit, and thank you so much for all your wisdom, and thank you everyone for listening. And their website will be below, so if anyone is interested in going deeper and higher, and yeah, and thank you so much.
My pleasure, Mar. Thank you. Thank you for translating this into Spanish. That's really an honor. I did a similar thing in Turkish recently, so I'm really excited to have that, especially in Spanish, to be able to share with some
Sure.
friends.
Yeah, and the video, I will give it to you as well. So
wonderful. All right. Well, thanks again, and I will see you in space.
yes.